Hello, so today I'm going to be talking about AI and the impact on society, as well as things like social media impact and these ever increasing applications which are flooding into the market and how it's impacting our society and generations. So I think first off, I'm going to talk about mobile phones. Now, when I grew up, mobile phones weren't of this caliber. This is a OnePlus 12, it's quite fast, Snapdragon Gen 3, quite a good phone, right? But there's one problem with this, right? We can now run YouTube, we can run Instagram, we can run all of these different apps on these particular phones. And what I've noticed over time, right, what employers are saying is that as these applications are becoming more and more abundant, people are not being able to communicate, right? So if we look at kind of what the news is saying at the moment, things like Generation Z, saying that communication is becoming an abundant problem, whereby excessive training needs to now be enforced. Can I just ask you something then, as from an employer perspective? So you've gone and made an application which, you thought was bringing everybody together, but yet in that whole idea of bringing people together, somehow we're more and more apart than ever because people are using an application on their phone. Like, I'm not sure if that kind of resonates or if that's just a dichotomy or if that's just a weird thing to go through. So as we're going through all of this, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, I remember back in the day, right? Back in the 1990s, right? Phones weren't of this caliber. We had phones which were like bricks, like the Nokia 3210, right? They were like bricks. All you had to do was play Snake, right? You played Snake on this phone, you dialed it, it was built like a brick, and nothing really happened to it. It lasted a week. Like you could, like a week off charge would be fine. You come back, and you would then just play with the phone, right? Nowadays, you need to have like multiple phones in order to kind of keep up because, this phone doesn't have a removable battery, right? This is another phone which I have, which is a Nord phone, Nord 4, with a titanium back, which is very, very nice. But both of which don't have removable batteries, and they're only waterproof up to a certain extent, right? But back in the day, you were able to remove the batteries, put a SIM card in, put your uh, put your memory card in, right? And you were pretty much good to go. And Sony, I think, made some other phones where you could do some of the things, right? So how does that relate back to AI and stuff like this, right? So when we use AI, we do use it to engineer different phones and different solutions, but at the same time, it removes the creative ability that a human has. And we can see this more with things like code repos, right? If you look at a code repo, a lot of employers now will turn around and say, well, junior engineers can't code because they're doing things like vibe coding and not understanding what the code means. Well, yeah, because they're using AI. But yet, when it comes to an interview, you won't allow those same people to use AI because you want to evaluate how good their code is. But yet, you are the same people who are creating the AI for that exact reason. Like, what did you expect? Like, what were you thinking? I don't get it. You want to make the world a better place, but yet when the result comes, you don't like it. Okay, I get what you're trying to do. You're trying to reduce the labor, right? That's exactly what you're trying to do. Like, you're trying to reduce your labor costs, so that way you get more profit. That way you can pay yourself more. Well, it's going to be yourself more because you're not going to have employees. You're going to have agents and product engineers. Well, allegedly, to go and sort out these, RAG models. These RAGs, right? The agents, and then you're going to have that one, dominant agent LLM running that particular model to say, right, okay, everything's cushy, right? The problem here is that, once you've made a model of sufficient intelligence and sufficient consciousness to either replicate itself or create agents autonomously, what need do you have to be for both the labor market, which already is being impacted by this sort of mentality immensely, and what need do you have for uh, even running the company? Because you would reach a stage of such significance, right, which is called the AG, which I think is called AGI within AI, as far as I understand it. You reach AGI, and then you turn around and say, oh, the AI is more intelligent than a human. Okay, cool. Very well. Like the AI is more intelligent than a human. So what need do you have for a CEO? What need do you have for a human being? Right? What need do you have? Because you're not going to hire them. Why would you? You already have the AI there doing all of the jobs for you. So you can become a one-man band now. Right? Any idea that is being created is going to be AI generated and can be seen as AI anyway. Right? Because it doesn't have any sort of creative spark. You know, it doesn't have that human soul and touch. So what do I mean by the human soul and touch? If you go to, so let's say for example you're a traveler, right? And you go towards, I don't know, let's say you go to Thailand, you go to Cambodia, you go to one of these countries, right? Spain, you know, and you look at these really, really ancient buildings, right? It's Greece, for example, Rome. And you see these ancient buildings like the Colosseum. You look at Wat Panang. You look at even that really famous one in Cambodia, right? I forget what it's called. I think it's Wat Tong or something like that. But you look at these really, really old architectures. You sit down and you think to yourself, wow, there was no mobile phones here. You know, even in India, if you go to India, these temples which are just beautiful, you know, you have Shiva temples, you have temples dedicated to Lord Ram, the one in Ayodhya, right? If you go to Thailand, Ayutthaya, you look at the old capital, you look at some of these temples, beautiful architecture. Even in ruins, they look beautiful. Right? Because someone designed them. Someone took their time to understand what was needed, and they stand the test of time. You go there, how come nowadays you go to a flat, right? You go to any one of these new buildings, you can punch a wall and your hand will come out the other side. Where's the craftsmanship? Where's the quality? And I think that, this is the weird thing in many different industries. We're so used to cost cutting. We're so used to ignoring quality for the sake of some monetary gain. We've forgotten what it means to slow down and have craftsmanship. So when people turn around and say, you know, don't be a perfectionist, I turn around and say, are you a craftsman? Because if you're a craftsman, you'd stand behind what you're selling. You'd stand behind what you're doing, right? Because that's essentially what a craftsman does. You know, they don't want to look. They don't want to be embarrassed by what they've produced. They want to be able to say, I've taken my time. I've taken it as far as I can. This is what I produced. Right? You like it? Good. If you don't, help me to create a better version. Right? And that's what it's about. But if we're just putting this into the hands of AI, which is just making assumptions anyway, what's the point? Can you see where I'm going with this? When you think about it, it's quite dystopian. Because it is. Like, yes, AI can bring about a great time in humanity. You can turn around and say, right, okay, cancer has been cured, AIDS has been cured, polio has been cured as a result of AI, right? Some great achievements within the health space, right, can come about because of AI. Research papers, new methods of killing unwanted bacteria. All of this is really, really good stuff, right? But this is what we should be using AI for. Because at the end of the day, the research is so high within the medical field to try and figure out what's going on that it makes sense, right? Like, how can we expect everybody to remember what, like, the DNA around the proteins around cancer or around COVID-19, right, with the protein spike, right? We can't. It's too much information. That's why things like books were invented, right? And this is a good point as well, right? For example, a great book, Simon Sinek's Find Your Why, right? Fantastic books. And this leads me on to my next point. You know, when I look at some of my YouTube statistics, people watch for 30 seconds. Now that's not by accident, that's by purpose, right? That's by purpose. Now why do I say 30 seconds? Well, if you look at what people watch, most people will watch YouTube shorts, Instagram reels, right? Things of that nature. So what does that tell us as a society? We're not able to focus for longer than 30 seconds. Because we get bored, we want the next dopamine hit. So when employers turn around and say, oh, you know, the new generations that are coming out now, they're not able to focus for longer than 30 seconds. Funny that, right? It's funny. It's funny. What we engineer and what we think is quite a good purpose for and benefit for society may not necessarily be the thing that we thought it was. How funny is that? Right? So what's the solution here? Well, first of all, read, and actually read proper books, right? Like, you know, Simon Sinek's Find Your Why. Start with Why by Simon Sinek. Very good book, one that I've been trying to understand myself, and that's definitely one that I would say is worth having a look at, especially during this time and age. Especially during this time and age, right? Other books as well that you can have a look at. You know, The Alter Ego. This one is by, who was this by? Todd Herman, this particular book. Sit down and learn how to read a book. Right? I think that's one thing. The communications problem. Easy. This. Done. Like, and somehow, for some reason, companies need to spend millions of pounds trying to understand simple things. How, like, did I spend any money to go and throw my phone over there? Did I spend any money to, you know, read a book? I mean, I could get this in the library. I mean, I bought it, but I could get it in the library. Like, seriously. We're so used to being such a fast-paced world, we've forgotten what it means to slow down and just understand what the world is about. Like, you know, schools have done a very good one, actually. Schools have turned around and said, you know, we're going to do A-level at the end of the year. So you do your 12 and 13, you know, your A1 and A2 at the end of the year, which I think is a brilliant idea because it encourages critical thinking. But first of all, you need to rely on all the information. So what does that mean? It means that you're forced to be critical thinking, right? Which is great. So how do we increase critical thinking? Well, first of all, you need to increase the attention span, right? Through things like dopamine detox, right? The other thing, meditation. My goodness. Companies, why is meditation not a thing? I don't understand, right? We come in and then we praise these top tier companies, you know, these top tier companies. I'm not going to name them because I know who they are, but these top tier companies, they come in and then they turn around and say, oh, we have sleep pods, or we've got a slide which goes from one place to another place. But I don't hear any company turn around and say we have a meditation room. I don't hear any company turn around and say, oh, we have a fitness studio. Some will say that, well, okay, some of them will say we have a gym within it, which is pretty cool, which I think is a good start. You know, but nobody really kind of turns around and says, oh, you know, maybe actually some of the perks that we're selling for aren't necessarily perks, right? Well, okay, some companies do have some really good perks. I'll give them that, but at the same time, it's like, well, shouldn't we do better? You know, like, you know, if we had a gym, I mean, that's actually an incentive to come into the office when you think about it, right? If you're a CEO listening to this, right, and you have a mega corporation and you want people to come to the office, have a meditation center or a gym. Like, you'll be surprised at how many people would actually want to turn up to the office, right, for that. Because now it's like, oh, I can get my workout done at 7 a.m., right, start my work for 9. It gives me an hour to work out. I can go and have go and get my breakfast, go and get changed. Breakfast bar in the actual office, right? Now you're encouraging people to work because they've got an incentive to now, right? But if the work can be done remotely, then the work can be done remotely. But more and more often we're seeing people say, oh, come back into the office. Why? Why do you need to come back into the office? And I'm pretty sure I stand with a lot of people when they say this. But getting back to the topic of AI. So yeah, that's a couple of thoughts on AI at the moment. And on top of that, with AI, we're seeing a lot of different. I mean, we're seeing a lot of different things, right? So we talked about reading, we talked about meditation, But I think that with AI, there's going to be quite a few things which are going to come out of this because at the moment AI is not able to really read code very well. I do think it has some bugs in terms of reading code, and that's because of the context window, right? So when you do a prompt, you have a context window, you type in what you want, and then it hits the limit. Right? And it got me thinking as well. It's like, okay, so if you're a developer and you're wanting to run an LLM, you want to run a model, right? There's a couple of ways that you could do it, right? You could use something like Amazon Q, you could use Amazon Bedrock, SageMaker, right, to go and understand how to run the model. Okay, fair enough. Like it makes sense. It's offline. It's not offline. It's on the clouds, right? But to run those models costs quite a lot of money, right? So what do companies do? They say, right, okay, let's turn around and we'll invest in a H100, right, which is like £1 million investment, drop in the ocean for most companies, right, in AI. All right, cool. So you run on a H100, cool, right? Now you've got the ability to train the model, you've got the ability to talk to the model, you've got the ability to do inferencing, you've got the ability to use computer vision, all that good stuff, right? Cool. The problem is this. If you're working on such a large language model, right, you can't run that entire model on your computer if you're a solo developer. So how does that work? Because you're trying to build something which, you know, only gives you so much data to run on? Like, how does that? Anyway, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, if you want to get into it, then it's like, you're limited by what you can run because of your computing horsepower, right? So then it got me thinking, like, oh, okay, so you need to invest quite a bit of money just to become a product engineer to, move with the times. Okay, but that's quite a significant investment. Not a lot of people have the ability to get a substantial amount of money to then purchase a laptop, to run an AI model, to learn how AI works, right? And then at the end of the day, hopefully find a job out of it. Yeah? Yeah? Why is that? Well, this is where it gets weird as well. Why is that? Because we have a lot of kind of funny ways of communicating, I would say. Funny ways of communicating. So, for example, if you know a lot about, if you say LLM on your CV, for example, you know, a lot of people will turn around and say, I don't know what LLM is. But if you increase the length of LLM to large language model, right? Even if I use the unabbreviated term, right? If a normal person doesn't understand what LLM is, and what I mean by normal is somebody who hasn't seen these terms before, right? They're not really going to understand what large language model means anyway, right? Which kind of signifies that we're moving so quickly in AI that maybe having specialist recruiters would actually make sense, right? Who are kind of in the field. And like, I do wonder if sometimes it actually makes more sense for engineers to hire people than it does for recruiters. Because engineers actually have an idea of what some of these terms mean and what kind of people they want to kind of work with. So if you're already talking to an engineer in the first stage of the interview, you already know what team you're working with, right? It makes me wonder, now that we're using AI in order to do recruitment, right, through something called ATS apparently, You know, is that the right way of doing things because it's creating a bias within the company in order to find somebody who is at that actual um, standards that the company requires, right? And even then, is that really the right way of doing it? Because with AI, you have something called temperature and Q, right? So temperature is like the randomness that an AI has, and Q is the kind of quality of the data that you want to receive. So, you know, ideally you want to have the Q at a very high level and the temperature at a very low level, right? But then is the AI too strict, right? Are we losing people in the workplace for silly reasons, right? To do with how the AI is actually programmed and the decisions that it's trying to make. Now that's a very, very good question. And I think it's one that we need to delve in a little bit more and say, right, okay, is this really what we want? Right? Because again, we're losing that human touch. You know, talking to machines is causing a lot more frustration than talking to another human being. Why? How are you supposed to relate back to a human, sorry, not to a human being, but to an AI, right? Let's think about this for a second. So we have, you know, Tinder, which is going to be on this thing, right? You use Tinder, right? And here's a good one as well. If you go to any kind of these, I'm not going to say the name, but these illicit, let's say these explicit websites, explicit, let's use that word, explicit websites. You go to an explicit website, and one of them turns around and says, "Oh, chat to our AI, you know, chat to our AI girlfriend," I think is what they call it nowadays, right? Oh, here we go. So AI girlfriend, right? Now, if we're already producing, I hate to use the word producing, but you know, this is the sad state of affairs right now. If we're producing people who have the qualities that I've talked about within this video, you know, those are going to be people who are vulnerable to using that particular type of application, right? Which poses real problems, because not only is it creating less labor, we're now, because of these particular pressures, we will see a decline within the population. Now, some people may turn around and say, well, that's good, right? More wealth for me. Yes, until it isn't. Because, like I said before, if you're a CEO of a company and you're working flat out, you may not necessarily have a family. You may not necessarily want kids because you're so busy running your damn company, right? That you may not have the ability all the time, investment, in order to kind of, in order to produce another being in the world that you can actually spend time with. Now, that's a paradox in itself, isn't it? Because you turn around and say, well, oh, AI is supposed to solve that problem. Maybe. Maybe. But then, for that particular one human that you've raised, you've affected 20. And there's a dichotomy. There's a dichotomy. Right? Yes, you have delegation in order to get to 6 figures. It makes complete sense. But do you want an AI realistically to do it for you? Maybe as a solo person to begin with, absolutely. And maybe that's the point of having the prompt engineers. Maybe that's the point, right? To go and fix the AI. But then at the same time, they're getting so advanced, do you actually need them? You see? So I don't think it's one question with AI. It's not a case of like, oh, it's going to take over the world. It's going to take over the world. Let's face it. The change is inevitable. It's already here, right? I don't think it's a case of it's going to take over the world. It's just how it's going to do it, I think, is a major problem. I think that's the problem. I don't think it's going to be a case of like, you know, Terminator, you know, now we have a rogue AI who's in charge of our defense systems. Oh, you know, the next Cyberdyne systems, all that kind of stuff. Well, you know, there's a 10% chance that's going to happen. But at the same time, I don't think it's necessary, right? Because, you know, I mean, as far as I know, AI is already being used in militaristic applications. But at the same time, you know, do we necessarily care as a species? I don't know. You know, maybe we do, maybe we don't, right? Because, you know, when you think about it, it only takes one mistake. You know, if that AI gets hacked by another rogue AI, what happens then? What happens then? Like, you know, like when I think about it, we talk about the kind of the solopreneur, who makes an AI, makes an AI company or whatever, turns around and then says, oh, I'm on holiday now because, my company runs automatically. Cool. But then if my AI gets hacked, which is doing all the processes, what happens then? What happens then? Do you rely on your AI to produce cybersecurity practices which are in line with, industry standards, assuming that there are any industry standards, because AI has taken over that as well? Like, what do you do as a human being? Right? How are you just like, because throughout time, one thing has remained certain. The one thing that's remained certain is that, um, you trade your time for value and your value for time, right? At least that's in the traditional sense, right? But if you have AI which is providing you the entirety of your value, why are you needed? And I think this is a very dangerous question. Very dangerous. Because at the end of the day, if AI can do everything, you're not needed. Why do we need you? And that, I think, in itself is going to cause a lot of problems. A lot of problems. You know, and we're already seeing the kind of start of it. So, to bring this to a close, right, in terms of the AI and the impact of society, we really do need to think about what AI is doing, right? The applications of AI. Why do we need AI in certain places, right? Yes, I get it. Humans can make mistakes, right? But what I've learned, right, in the period that I've been in, where I've been, not employed and all that kind of stuff, is that there's no such thing as perfection, right? There's passion, right? Passion to do something, to go and create something, to build something good for the world, right? Passion. But it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be perfect, right? Like even in this video, I'm scared of saying certain things in this video. I'm not sure if it's gonna be received well. I don't know if, um, you know, I don't know if this will make an impact on anybody. I don't know if this will make an impact on me or be detrimental to me in the future, right? It's all relative. It's all relative, right? And this is why, even though I'm bashing AI and in some cases some, CEOs and companies, you've got to admire what they do. You've got to admire what they do because they are facing a lot of uncertainty. The world is a very uncertain place. And you've got to admire what they do. Like, I think a lot of times when I see people in startups, they're some of the most friendliest people I've ever met. Honest to God. They are some of the coolest people, some of the friendliest, some of the most creative, you know, ingenuitive people I've ever met. And I've ever had the pleasure of working with. Right? Because they always keep their why. Why am I doing this? What opinions can I take from other people? What's the best way to drive forward? Right? They don't admit to knowing everything. And there's a lot of the time when I go into IT, I always feel there's an emphasis on knowing everything. But the truth is you can't know everything. There's too much to learn, right? Already within my videos, right? I did one on the Multi-Tech Spec channel around networking. I did one around DevOps. I've done one around cybersecurity. At least I think I have. I'm not sure if I've done one on cybersecurity yet, but um, you know, these are just three things, right? Linux. We talk about um, DevOps practices with CI/CD, EKS, Amazon, VPC, S3, all these different technologies, right? But what does it mean in the long run? It means that you've got to learn more and more things. So how do you ever master it? Because you can spend years on this thing. Years. You can get down, right? Computer science is so huge, you can get down to an atomic level, right? Down to the atoms, down to the quantum field, the quantum field of, right, how these atoms move, right? Quantum tunneling in circuitry, right? Down to this sort of level in the nanometer range, right? Now this is a Raspberry Pi 4 with a PoE hat, right? You know, and this is networking based as well, right? So if I plug a Ethernet cable into this, right, and I induce a voltage, I'll be able to power it without any sort of power supply. It just powered off the rail, right? It's powered off the well, it actually is powered off the rail, be off the 5 volt rail, but it'll be powered off the Ethernet cable, right, on PoE. And if I use PoE plus, I can get even more watts, right? I think it's 33-watt delivery, right? So imagine that. Like I can power, in the future, we'll be able to power light bulbs of a single cable. Remarkable, but weird at the same time. Gets you thinking. So yeah, I mean, it's all relativistic. And I think that with the rise of AI, things are becoming very, very uncertain. I think it's just very, very uncertain for society. I think society doesn't really know what it wants to do with AI. A lot of people in the industry don't really know what to do with AI. They just see it as a tool of opportunity, but haven't really stepped back to say, right, okay, what actual opportunity is open to us? Right? Yes, you can build businesses. Yes, you can, try and solve the innate problems of humanity. Yes. But are you actually solving them, or are you trying to improve them? Because at the end of the day, a lot of the problems that are actually out in society have, by this time, at least in Western society, most of it's already been solved, within the time of the Industrial Revolution. If we go back in history. So what is it that we're trying to solve here? What problems? Yes, we have AI. Yes, we have libraries which can run massively complex problems, right? Like the NVIDIA CUDA libraries, to name one, right? Yes, great, great, great library to use that you can use an AI with TensorFlow and PyTorch and all that kind of stuff, right? Cool. But what's the point? Why? Right? And this is what I want a lot of engineers to really come to terms with. Why? Why are you doing it? What value does it bring to you? What value does it bring to society? What value does it give for you to wake up in the morning and do it? Right? These sort of things. Because that's what's important. This, what am I going to do with this when I'm dead? It's going to stay here. Useless, when you think about it. Great little project, I'll give you that, but is it a good use of time? I don't know. I don't know. And this is what I mean. Like, if it saves someone's life, good use of time, right? It's going to be a fantastic use of time. If it saves someone's life, if it helps to contribute to society in some way, then yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? But if it doesn't, then I don't know, man. What's the point? And I think that's what we need to kind of slow down, just take a look and say, maybe the problems that we're trying to solve, aren't the correct problems. We need to solve different problems altogether. And yeah, I mean, I'm sorry this video's been a bit dystopian, but I think it's worth the discussion. It really is. We're at the stage now where we need to elevate and become better humans. This is where it's going. We need to become better humans. The only way we're going to become better humans is if we all start to improve collectively, not as singular entities. If you look at a tree, right? Yes, you may see that there's a tree there, but look at the roots. You ever seen the roots of a tree? It's fascinating. You may think that, that single tree outside is a singular tree. It's much more than a tree, my friend. If you look in the forest, right? A lot of trees, they will have their roots which grow down to the actual floor. Now those roots will actually interact with different trees. When they interact with different trees, they share nutrients. It's not about being singular. Yes, you have a contribution as being a singular person, but if you can contribute to the group, the group should contribute towards you as well. That's what it's about. Then that's what I would say to any young engineer. Any young person, right? Yes, be the lone wolf. Why not? But man, learn how to work in the pack as well. That's where the joy is going to come from. It's not about being loyal to a cause, but yeah, well, okay. Let me rephrase that. Yes, it's about being loyal to a cause which is your own values, right? Which you value yourself. But at the same time, I think we should have people behind us who encourages us and make sure that we're on the right path, right? And AI is not going to do that for you. And AI is just going to be like, oh, that's a great one. Job interviews. Let's talk about job interviews. This is going to be great. Right, so if you go to a job interview, right, apparently there's a 1 in 4 chance that the person you're interviewing is either an AI or a fake job. Brilliant, right? Okay, now here's where it gets clever. So, if we're building AIs which are becoming increasingly more and more intelligent, yeah? Here's the kicker. That would mean that I can build an AI avatar to answer a question inside of an interview and no one would ever know. Because the AI would be able to use my voice, use sensory inputs that I have, right? Be able to copy my exact motions, which, like I'm doing in this video. If I do this, right, that's the motion, right? If I'm using my voice as is right now, that would be one emote, right? That would be like an emote, right? So if it's emoting like that, how would an interviewer ever know on a Zoom or a Skype call whether or not that particular candidate is authentic? So you've just given the job to an AI, right? If you think about it over time, that's kind of a scary thought, right? That's wow, right? Like, how scary is that? Like, you could be in the Bahamas somewhere, not give two, you know what I mean, about the interview, right? And then this AI that you've made, right, with an LLM, of 20 billion parameters or however many billion parameters you need to pass the interview, is doing the work for you. Like, so then should the AI even get paid at that point? Like, and even then, you've got to be quick to figure out if it's an AI or not, right? Nowadays, yes, you could probably get away with it. Why ChatGPT kind of comes around with this critical thing saying, well, I wouldn't say ChatGPT, okay, that's just being a bit rude, but a lot of the large language models, right, turn around and say, certainly. I mean, who starts a sentence with the word certainly? Right? So that's a dead giveaway. But as these AIs become more and more sophisticated, they'll be like, okay, yes, I see where you're coming from. Like stuff like that, right? Then it becomes a lot more tricky to decipher whether or not you're talking to an AI or not, right? So I'm wondering how that's going to work inside the workplace, how that's going to be working inside of that recruitment itself, right? Because you wouldn't necessarily know at that point, right? That's where it gets tricky, And then, when you think about it, you can also have note-taking apps which are underneath. Now, I'm not too averse of note-taking apps. I think some of them are really, really good because they summarize a lot of points within the interview as to what you can improve and what you can't improve, right? And that's really, really important, right? As a candidate, you want to know what you're trying to improve on, what you need to improve on in order to get the job interview, right? And sometimes it can be really small things. It can be just a communication error. It can be really big things like, okay, you don't have enough technical knowledge, right? But at that point, you really want to know as a candidate what you can do to improve to get your chances of getting a job, right? That's what you want at the end of the day, right? You want to be able to have a job. Some people don't. They want financial time freedom, that kind of stuff, which is all brilliant, by the way. No problems or quarrels with that, right? And in some cases, it can help you do both, right? AI can do both because that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to incorporate the entirety of the human knowledge and existence, right? So yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting one, right? Like, because I'm thinking to myself, then who gets the contract then? If you get an job offer and the person who's done the actual job is an AI, right? But it's written such sophisticated code, right? And it leads me on to some companies are actually rewriting their entire code base using AI, but then turn around and say, oh, the code is not going to be that great because it's written by AI and it's kind of all garbled code. Yeah, but the actual developer, the actual person who's using the code or utilizing the code is also using AI to solve the problems of the previous AI. So what happens then? Like, what happens to the code base then? Because you don't really need human intervention at that point, right? Because you're already using AI in order to write the code, right? And AI can just sit there and write the code anyway. So what do you need to do as a dev? Like, you're not really doing anything at that point, right? And I'm wondering if is that really what a product engineer does, right? If you go there and then you say, right, you know, if I want to create such and so, right, then at that point it's just business logic, right? It's just writing business logic, I guess, to an AI. Maybe that's what the job is supposed to be. I don't really know, right? I'm not a product engineer. I'm just speculating. So don't take my words as being gospel. It's just what I think is going to happen, right? These are all opinions. These are not facts by any means. So yeah, I think it's an interesting kind of point, really, where we're going. I'm not sure necessarily if I agree because when I think about even the sacred act of teaching, you know why do I say it's a sacred act? Well, if you have a child, a child doesn't. You see, it's very interesting with children because children don't have any preconceived notions, right? We as adults we teach children preconceived notions based upon patterns. So, for example, you know, um, I went to the monastery the other day, and we talk about inverted attention, right? So, in a nutshell, right, we would say this is a jar, right? But this is a preconceived notion of what a jar is. There actually is no jar, right? It's just a word to, emphasize what um, this object is, right? You know, like glass, right? Because we hear the noise. Okay, it's stuff like that. But when we train an AI is not going to know. An AI is just going to say, oh, this is something that resembles glass because of X, Y, Z. Key value store data points. So with that information, then it says, oh, okay, yeah, this is what I believe a jar is. But in real life, this is just a manufactured object that has properties resembling a jar. Yeah. So it's going to get very interesting, and that probably leads me into the hallucination problem, right? And I think that that's what it is, right? When we think of AI, it hallucinates, and I'm wondering how they're going to how that problem is going to be solved, because when we think about hallucination, right, and this is another societal problem, right? If we've talking about phones, we've talking about book reading, meditation, self-improvement practices, right? And AI can't do any of that. It can't experience that, right? So when we, look at the AI in that kind of place, it's going to be becoming very cold, very calculative, not able to really understand human emotion in that kind of sense, right? So I don't know how that's going to be programmed into an AI. I believe, they'll probably use a way of tracking the neurochemical stimulants that enter into our brain, right? So looking at the neural patterns, the neural pathways, the connectomes, the synapses, the axons, that kind of stuff, right? Looking at how processing is happening in our prefrontal cortex and our cerebellum to store information, right? So all these kind of connected patterns. But even then, right, these are just electrically charged signals to try and understand what something is. It's not necessarily that, it's love or hate or whatever, right? These kind of emotions that we perceive it to be. And that's going to be very interesting when the AI comes into full fruition, because is that really what is that level of thinking that it perceives that it has? inducive to what we believe, right? To be love and that kind of thing. It's going to be a very, very interesting question. And yeah, I don't know the answer to that. You know, maybe there's an AI engineer listening to this who has the answer. So yeah, that the impact on society that way is going to be just a heightened level of anxiety, a heightened level of just uncertainty when we have robotics with AI to kind of love, right? Well, we talked about the dating thing. It's going to result in more people not understanding how to communicate with human beings because they're so used to that dopamine hit of talking to females, well, perceived females on a screen that bow to their every whim because they've talked to an AI which doesn't display true female characteristics. What do I mean by true female characteristics? Right? Well, a female would have their own characteristics in order for their mate selection process, right? Because if they want to have a mate, a female would want somebody who can provide for the child, right? So if a female wants somebody to provide for the child, they're going to have innate characteristics and innate ways of finding out if they're able to, if this particular male is able to do so, right? An AI can't do that because an AI doesn't have any need to reproduce. So why would it have any vested interest in children? So we're looking at the kind of very high level things of, the Terminator kind of level dystopian era of AI, when I think the dystopian levels will actually come in more kind of micro level events, like we've talked about within this video. So yeah, I hope that's kind of helped in some way in terms of this AI discussion. And yeah, I hope to see you again soon. Appreciate it. Thank you.